Hey Rip City, this is Anthony Simons, and it's time to open the briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Blazer fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, episode 110 of The Briefcase. I'm your host, Casey Holdahl, and the season is finally upon us. Media Day was on Monday, the first day of training camp on Tuesday, leading into about a week and a half of practices before their first preseason game, a Friday from now in Seattle. We'll talk about Media Day, we'll talk about the first day of practice, and we'll hear from Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups at Media Day on this edition of The Briefcase. Well, before we discuss Media Day and training camp, a few little bits of business to get out of the way first. Not small bits of business, but not exactly business pieces of business, not necessarily basketball pieces of business, though anything that has to do with the business does usually end up helping the basketball, but you know what I'm talking about. So one of the things that come out of Media Day, the Trailblazers have a New Jersey patch sponsor, Brightside Windows. A local window company will be the sponsor this season. To do some press release reading here, the Trailblazers and Brightside Windows have reached a partnership agreement with Brightside Windows to be the official jersey patch partner of the Portland Trailblazers. The partnership will showcase Brightside Windows logo on all Trailblazer games, practice, and NBA Summer League jerseys. That's actually a new thing too. I don't think we had a Summer League jersey patch. Maybe we did, I don't recall. But they're going to be on all our jerseys this year. Brightside Windows has been serving Oregon and Washington communities since 2020, leading the way in home window replacement. The partnership marks the first time in franchise history that a local organization built right here in Portland will be showcased as a Trailblazers jersey patch partner, which will highlight the shared passion for authenticity, connection, and growth. Brightside Windows is now the first window company to sign a jersey patch deal in professional sports. A company on the rise in the Pacific Northwest, Brightside was recently recognized as number 60 on the 2024 Incorporated 5,000 fastest growing private companies in the United States list. Say that 5 times fast. Other elements of the partnership include Brightside Windows serving as a supporting partner for the Portland Trailblazers youth basketball program, which is very cool, assisting with clinics throughout the year to build up the next generation of Rip City. Additionally, Brightside Windows and the Portland Trailblazers will hold a co-volunteering event with a local nonprofit directly impacting Rip City. Fans will benefit from the partnership with the chance to win a free window installation, which who couldn't use some new windows, particularly going into winter. Trailblazers experiences, and more, with additional details to follow at a later date. And finally, as a part of the partnership, Brightside Windows has also been named as the official jersey patch sponsor of the Rip City Remix, which is the Trailblazers G League team. So practice jerseys, Summer League jerseys, G League jerseys, Trailblazer jerseys. So Brightside Windows running the whole gamut of Trailblazer jersey patches. Welcome to the family, Brightside Windows. And in more jersey patch news is coming out last week, the team will honor Bill Walton this season with a memorial jersey band. More press release reading, the Trailblazers will honor late Rip City legend Bill Walton with a band on their jersey throughout the 2024-25 season. Walton passed away on May 27th at the age of 71. All of Portland's jersey will feature a uniquely Walton tie-dyed band along the top side with his 32 number in white. The organization will host a special Bill Walton tribute night, as I mentioned, on March 9th. That night will feature special elements throughout the night to honor Walton and his contribution to Rip City and the game of basketball. All fans in attendance are encouraged to wear tie-dye and will receive a special tie-dyed headband. Oh, geez, I didn't even know that. That's awesome. So they can rock Bill Walton's classic style. There'll be in-game video tributes, more in-game activations, in-person activations, so on and so forth. March 9th for the Rip City Bill Walton Memorial Night. But the jersey patch will be worn all season long. It's cool. It's tie-dye. Ask a couple players about it at Media Day. They love it. It's a nice little way to honor Bill Walton. I know a lot of you wanted a full tie-dye jersey. Maybe at some point in time we'll get that. But if you're at all aware with what it kind of takes to get a jersey from the start to the finish, it takes quite a bit of time, more time than the team had after Bill Walton's unfortunate passing. So maybe at some point in time that happens. But as of right now, we'll just have to do with a jersey patch, which I think will be a nice addition as well. So you got Brightside Windows as the sponsor patch. You got Bill Walton as a memorial patch this season. And while they haven't officially, I don't think, announced the city editions, you've all seen them at this point. So I think that's about all of the jersey stuff to get to this season, but there might be more at some point in time. They might have a different jersey. No, I don't think they're going to do a different jersey for the in-season tournament games this year. I don't think, at least. Maybe a different court. Some of you might have noticed, too, there is a slightly different court at Moda Center now, which was, I won't say accidentally debuted during the WNBA announcement, but it was on the court was on the ground, and just a few changes here and there. Same with the court at the practice facility as well, some changes there, though the court at the practice facility not the same as the court at the Moda Center, which is usually not the case anyways, but that's a little court news for you as well. Well, now onto the Trailblazers Media Day. I would say, not a whole lot to report from Media Day. I was actually doing the doc series station rather than the media availability station, so I didn't get to see, or at least not until after the fact, what the players and the coaches said during the media portion. But I did talk to almost every single player and coach and front office staffer for the doc series. You'll be able to see some of that stuff on the upcoming editions of the Trail. I believe probably even the preseason edition that we'll be releasing sometime before the start of the regular season. But I would say, too, not that you guys probably care all that as much about this, but by far the smoothest media day I've ever been a part of in my 20 some odd seasons, either covering the team or working for the team. Doing it at Memorial Coliseum, everything was kind of tight and close, and guys were able to get to the stations quickly. Everyone was having kind of a good time. A lot of times too, like as I had mentioned on Twitter, someone was talking about how Nikola Jokic was talking about how much he doesn't like media day, and I was like, look, no one likes media day. Like, we just have to do it to get it over with. And so a lot of times players, they're usually in good spirits, but some guys are a little easier to deal with others. Some guys a little more willing to kind of be gregarious and have fun than others. This time around, everyone was great. Like, no one had any problem doing anything. Everyone sat down, gave thoughtful, consistent answers, really kind of thought about the questions that were being asked and gave good answers to them. Not just kind of the perfunctory, like, this is what I'm supposed to say, so I'm going to say it, which I think is, it's a small thing, but I think it's a good sign. It shows, I think, that the team is feeling good going into training camp, and if you had a team full of guys who were kind of cranky about, the situation the Blazers are in, particularly veteran guys who, probably are a little more accustomed to winning than I think a lot of us assume the Trailblazers are going to do this year. There could be it would not be surprising if some guys came in, a little kind of salty about that. Definitely not at all the case. Like, again, just a very good vibe at 2024 Media Day for the Trailblazers. Does that mean they're going to have a super successful season this year? I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but it's a good start. And I think you can say that having guys come in and really seem like they're excited about the start of the season, optimistic about the start of the season, feeling like, there's good things on the horizon. I think that's obviously a great place to start, at least a whole lot better place to start than a bunch of guys coming in being like, boy, here we go, another season where we're going to have to take some losses and it's going to be tough. That was not at all the vibe I got from players. They're excited about the opportunity, and I think a lot of them, particularly the young guys, know that, like, hey, like, this is my chance to kind of make my own way and plant my own flag. That's something we'll talk about here in a minute, is that this training camp is really about competition for this team. And, I've been told over and over and over again in the run up to training camp that, like, hey, it's competition this year. Like, no one gets a spot, like, just because, you have X contract or just because you were drafted in X spot does not mean that you're going to get X amount of playing time. You have to come in and earn all that time. And if some guy behind you who didn't get drafted as high as you did, doesn't make as much money as you do, outplays you, he's getting that spot and you're going to have to try to take it from him. So, I think, for players, that's usually something they really appreciate, particularly when you have a young team, because that you're going to have a chance to go out there, compete and show what you can do and sink or swim, by your own abilities, not because of kind of what the organization might hope or think or have invested in another player. So, I think that's a great place to start, particularly when you're a young team that, again, is going to take its lumps and is really trying to figure out who they are, establish an identity. Those are the things that you want to happen. You want competition to be at the forefront of your practices, of your games. And I think the Blazers have done a pretty good job, at least initially, of setting that standard going into the first day of camp. And it just kind of buttress that notion that guys are excited about the competition. I mean, like, I did some interviews, and I thought guys like Robert Williams, DeAndre Ayton, and Matisse Thybulle had some really interesting things to say. And those guys are all guys who've been in the league for a while. So I really just got the sense that guys are really enthusiastic about their opportunities this year and how things are going to go. And, again, like, I don't think guys, particularly players, ever come into a season being like, well, we're not going to make the playoffs. Like, these guys are super competitive. They're very confident in their own abilities. So they always feel like, whatever it is they feel like they set their mind to, they're going to be able to do. So, you don't have a bunch of guys coming in being like, well, we're just going to try to compete and do our best this year. It's like, these guys want to come in and win. And, is that going to result in wins this season? It's going to help more than if they came in just resigned to the idea that, like, hey, we're still not where we need to be yet. And Joe Cronin, you're going to hear from him at the end of the show in his media day comments, it was honest about it. He's like, hey, we're just not good enough yet to compete at the highest levels, but we're trying to get there and we're going to work to get there. And, I think that's a smart thing for Joe to do, because it tells your fan base that you're honest about where you're at in your rebuilding process. And two, it sets a realistic expectation for the club in general. And that's not to say guys are going to come in and be like, well, it doesn't matter if we win or lose. Like, they want to win. They're driven by that on their own. And, Joe just coming out and being like, hey, we need to get better is not going to be a surprise to them. They already know that. That's kind of one of my things from years and years and years of working with players. Players know other players. Like, players know when they're good. Players know when their team is good. Players know when a team is not good. They're always the first guys that understand kind of where they're at, I think, and understand the situations they're in. So it's not like any of these guys are coming into camp, not understanding where the Trailblazers are at in terms of their maturation and growth process. But they're also, I think, know that, hey, if I come in and do my best, like, we can be a better team than a lot of people think we're going to be. So again, I think that's a great place to start. Everyone, one more time, just had a great enthusiasm and a great spirit at Media Day, and that's not always the case. And I think it just goes to show kind of how good of a job they've done in constructing this team to get them ready for good things going forward. Because again, like it's going to be a season-long process. We're already a couple seasons into it, so maybe take a few more seasons to get where the team wants to go. But, on a day-to-day basis, it seems like they're making the right decisions. It seems like the growth is there. And it seems like the players and the coaches are excited about the prospects, which, again, on day one is definitely what you want to see. Well, then once you get Media Day over, obviously the real exciting thing is the training camp practices start. So on Tuesday, the Trailblazers did hold their first day of training camp at their practice facility in Tualatin. They're doing 2-a-days, actually, which after a couple seasons of going to Santa Barbara to have training camp, they'd have practice in the morning and then they'd have team events at night, not necessarily practices. But now that they're back in Tualatin, I think the idea is like, hey, we're already here anyways. We're close. Let's go ahead and get another practice. So the first day of practice, as I understand it, more conditioning and kind of running a little bit, though we are going to see a little bit of video here. The video team put together a great little supercut of some of the stuff that happened in practice today. And, there is some run in there, so a little bit of playing, but for the most part, that first practice is more about kind of conditioning and setting a tone in terms of competition. And then the night practices are a little more kind of game specific. Don't get to see the night practices necessarily, though at some point in time, maybe we'll get to see a little more practice. That would be great. But it sounds like, from everyone we talked to at practice day, a really strong day of practice. Chauncey Billups, again, talked about the notion of competition and everyone having to come in and really earn their spot. I asked Anthony Simons at practice today, obviously the most tenured player on staff, a guy who I think we all assume is going to start this year, particularly probably a point guard. So I asked him, I was like, hey, what do you think about the competition at point guard? Because, obviously you got Scoot, you got a guy like Bryce McGowan, you got Delano Banton. And I thought Ant's answer was really good. He's like, yeah, like we all have to come in and compete and show that we're the guy who should have that spot. And, even a guy like Ant is not necessarily coming in and being like, well, I've been here for the longest and I've got a contract and I'm a vet, so I know I'm just going to get this spot. I think he's confident in his ability to win that starting spot, but I think he also knows that he has to go out and actually do it. And, that's for everyone on the roster, it's not like, well, we have a lot invested in Shaedon Sharpe at the 2, so he's going to start at the 2. It's like, no, he's got to come out and beat the guys in front of him, if there are guys in front of him, to get that starting spot. Same with the 3. It's like, well, you got Denny Advian, we just traded for him, so he's going to get that spot. And it's like, there's a very good chance he ends up winning that spot, but he has to actually go out and win it. And there's going to be other guys who are going to be trying to take that spot. So, and that, again, for Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton, anyone in that starting lineup last season, are they going to be the starter this year? I mean, there's a very good chance because you start in the league because you're typically a pretty good player. But again, they're going to have to actually go out and earn that in training camp. Nothing is going to be given this year. Nothing is going to be assumed. Doesn't matter how long you've been with the team. Doesn't matter where you got drafted. Doesn't matter how big your contract is. Doesn't matter the hopes and aspirations that the team has for you. It matters whether or not you're able to get it done on the court at training camp. And so, I think this camp is going to be really competitive. And that, again, that's what you want out of a training camp, particularly for a young team that's trying to kind of make their way. And I think on the first day, that tone was set. And I think, that's a really positive thing going forward. Again, really just a good vibe in the gym. Guys seem excited to be back. There's a real camaraderie, but also a sense of competition. And, those are things that you want to see out of your young teams. So a good first day of practice, and they're going to be back to it on Wednesday, and then Thursday, and then Friday, and then FanFest on Saturday. But before we talk a little more about the upcoming schedule, let's go ahead and watch this little video here that the video team put together from the first day of practice at the facility in Tualatin.
Have it run. I remember last year, to be honest.
Other than that, man, let's go have some fun. All right? Let's go, baby.
Together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Together on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Together.
Great stuff there, and I really appreciate the team kind of being a little more willing to show some of the things that happen behind the scenes. We already talked about. I thought the video that they did with the draft process leading up to drafting Donovan Clingan was fantastic. The kind of insight and behind the scenes stuff that you rarely see in sports in the NBA, and so the opportunity too to see just a little bit of kind of what's going on at practice. I think it is really cool, and I think it shows the team is really willing to kind of extend themselves a little bit more. They know that maybe, we need to bring some fans back a little bit. And so I think one of the ways to do that is to be a little more transparent about what happens on your team. And I think they're doing a really good job with that. They're walking that fine line between wanting to show more and also knowing that you can't give away too much of your hand, particularly early on in the season. But I think it's really great that the team is willing to do those things. And I think it helps all of us. It helps me as a journalist trying to explain things to you guys. I think it helps you guys understand kind of where the team is at and what your expectations might be for where they're at. And it's just fun to see guys back in the gym practicing, particularly when you have young new players. You always just want to see how those guys look in the gym together. So I thought that video was great. Shout out to the guys on our video team. Shout out to the team for allowing it as well. A few other small things from practice and from media day as well. Sounds like the entire team is healthy. Robert Williams III, I think is on limited practice right now because I think they're just kind of trying to take it really slow in terms of integrating him back into the lineup after having to have that knee surgery last year that ended his season in like the 4th or 5th game. And I'm just really hopeful that Rob is able to stay healthy because I told him this at media day, Rob is such a cool guy to be around. He's so much fun. He's got a real great way about him in terms of he's competitive and serious, but also knows how to have fun and be supportive of his teammates. He's got a real kind of gregariousness to him that I think people are drawn to. And, his game obviously is something the Trailblazers could absolutely use. A guy who's an elite rim protector, a guy who, they're already talking about trying to use him at 4 a little bit because I think they want to get him on the court as much as they possibly can this season, assuming that he's healthy. So, Rob, I think they're going to take it a little bit slow with him as you would. And that's kind of what they did last year at training camp too. Hopefully it works out better this time. I think they probably learned some things and, really hopeful that Rob is able to have a run of great health because he deserves it. It would be great for this team. And that's why they're going to take it slow to start, at least with training camp. Who's also to say how much you see Robert Williams in preseason? I at all wouldn't be surprised if he didn't play any in preseason, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he got into a few games. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But Robert Williams, the only guy who's dealing with anything, I think, physically right now. Obviously, nicks and bruises are going to happen throughout the course of a training camp practice. But for the most part, as far as I know, as far as we've been told, Rob is the only guy who's even kind of sort of being held out of a few things. Everyone else a full participant, which again, at the start of training camp is a great thing and not always has been the case for the Portland Trail Blazers. So you can't just leave that for granted. Also, real quick, too, speaking of centers, I wanted to mention Donovan Clingan was kind of asked about UConn practices versus Trailblazers practices, and he was like, yeah, UConn practices are more difficult. If you know anything about college basketball, that makes perfect sense. That should not at all be surprising for you. One, Blazers are having 2-a-days right now, so it's not like they're going to go super hard in that first practice and then have the guys come back later on tonight and go hard again. So that's part of it. And two, you just deal with professionals different than you deal with amateurs. And that's just the way it is, And you also have to recognize, too, that, pro players are pro players, and they typically do things in their off season that doesn't require them to have to put in as much work when they get to training camp, as opposed to being a teenager or a college kid who's out living his life as you should, and is maybe not spending as much in the time, and is definitely not paying trainers and nutritionists and physical therapists all kinds of money in order to prepare themselves for the season, like so many guys in the NBA do. I mean, and when you watch a college game, you watch an NBA game, there's the way the guys get around the court is different. It just has a different vibe, a different feel to it. So, I don't think that was a shot at anybody. In fact, I know it wasn't. Again, if you know basketball, you follow basketball, college programs are able to kind of grind you. That's kind of one of their things. You go there to kind of get shapened up. And then once you get to the pros, it's really more about refining your game. You obviously need to get better. They're obviously going to be hard on guys. I guarantee you guys are getting yelled at in Trailblazers practices. Guys are running hard in Trailblazers practices. But it's just a different vibe than it is in college because it's a different power dynamic. Coaches in the NBA are really more on the same level as the players, whereas in college, the coaches are elevated. They have much more power over their team than a NBA coach does. A college coach is the head of that program. An NBA coach, you got a couple guys ahead of you, typically a general manager, maybe a president, so that's also different as well. And again, it's it's the difference between adults working with adults and adults working with kids. So, I mean, like, yeah, that is going to look different. The way that you discipline in elementary school is going to look different than the way you discipline in high school. Like it's a different situation. You're dealing with people at different points of their lives, and the practices reflect that. So, you know, I know people are always going to take things a certain kind of way, but saying that a college practice is more difficult than a pro practice is not anything that raises the eyebrows of anyone who actually follows the college and pro practices. Real quick, getting everyone lined up for the schedule for the next couple weeks. Team will hold practices on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday before hosting FanFest on Saturday. Doors at 1 o'clock, scrimmage at 2 o'clock. Please go to trailblazers.com to get tickets for FanFest. They're free, but we need you to register so we know how many people are going to show up. Then another week of practice before heading to Seattle to face the Clippers in their first preseason game on Friday, October 11th at Climate Pledge Arena. Then the team will likely travel to Sacramento on October 12th to face the Kings on October 13th, and then back to Portland for more practice and to host the German team on October 16th and Utah on October 18th in the preseason finale. So a couple weeks of practices and preseason games before the season gets going here at the end of October. I'd have to go back and check, and I guess I should have probably checked before coming on here, but that feels like a little more time before the first preseason game. A lot of times it feels like you have like a week of practice and you play a preseason game. So basically almost getting in 2 weeks of practice before your first preseason game seems like a good thing to me. It seems like sometimes those preseason games are a little bit too fast, and they have 4 this year. I know they've had 5 before in the past. Maybe that's why it seems like there's a little more time in between games, a little more time to practice at training camp before the preseason starts, because there is one fewer game. But either way, week of practice, FanFest, a week of practice, preseason starts. All right, well, let's go ahead and get to some of the Media Day interviews. First up, Joe Cronin, Trailblazers General Manager. Joe talks a lot about the team still building, not being ready just yet to win at the highest levels, but working to get there. Going with continuity this summer over making wholesale changes. Chauncey Billups' contract situation. How he judges success outside of wins and losses. And that's a really important thing for this Trailblazer team, is how do you gauge success out of wins and losses? Because you know that some of those wins are going to be hard to come by this year, but you really want to have metrics where you can look at and say like, hey, we feel like we're making progress, or we feel like we're not making progress. And that way you can kind of work on the things you need to work on without necessarily having to get that gratification from a win. That's an incredibly important thing, so I'm glad Joe addressed it. Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe and the prospects of trade this season, particularly in regards to the veterans. Here's what Joe Cronin had to say at 2024 Trailblazers Media Day.
Morning. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Want to start off, offer condolences to the family and friends of Dikembe Mutombo. Rest in peace. Growing up in Denver, I was lucky to see the start of his career, and I went to quite a few games, and it was such a joy to watch him play. But I think we all know the impact he's not just that he had on the game of basketball, but that he had on the world as a whole, and he'll be missed. On to the Trailblazers. Very pleased with how the offseason went. Pretty quick and smooth compared to the summer before. We basically got all of our big transactions done on draft day, getting Deni Avdija in the early afternoon and then drafting Donovan Clingan later that evening. So 2 players that we think are going to make a big impact on this team, not just in the short term, but in the very long term. Also really pleased with the work that our guys got done this off season. Try to get them together as much as possible. Try to get a lot of 5-on-5 action going. Just trying to do as much, developing and bonding and gelling as we could. And we've had a really productive 4 or 5 months here. So, we'll get into, I'm sure, the status of some of the guys, injury status, and those kind of things. But overall, I thought it was a really, really productive offseason development-wise for our guys. We have a roster that we really like. We're happy where we are right now, but we love where we are headed. But to do that, we've got to take steps. We have a lot of talent on this roster, but a lot of it's untapped potential. There are, numerous young guys who have multiple steps they still need to take. We have a lot of veterans, if not all of them, who have at least 1, maybe 2 more good steps in them. And our challenge this season and in the short term overall is to keep developing and get these guys as good as possible. We've been working hard, throughout our time here to establish a mentality of connectivity, competitiveness, grit, high character, and we're going to continue to build on that. We know this season it's going to have its ups and downs. We like who we are, but we also know we're not ready to win at a high level yet. and we want to continue to build that foundation of prepping us for the long term so that we can have sustainable success.
Joe, last year you guys set out to develop, but injuries kind of derailed a lot of your plans. But what would the season look like this year? What does it need to look like for you to consider it a success, especially when the expectations are so low for you guys?
Yeah. I think one thing we're really hoping to find this year, throughout this season and definitely by the end of it, is more clarity. And to your point, Aaron, last year, I don't know how much clarity we walked away with. We saw, flashes and capabilities, but we didn't see sustained production or sustained cohesion. And I think this year we need to build on that, and we need to have a better feel and understanding of what we are, what moves we need to make, what additions we need to have, what's going really well. Like, we need just more focus on what our long-term outlook is going to look like.
You've been pretty candid about this being the early stages of a rebuild when you've talked to us recently. Where are you guys? Like, what you chose continuity over maybe some bigger changes this summer. Where are you, would you say, in that rebuild process?
I would say we're still in the earlier stages, just because there's still so much left to prove with this group, and a lot of that's based on what your young guys are capable of and when they're going to be ready. We've heavily invested draft pick wise, the last 3 drafts was Shaden, Scoot, and now Donovan. Until those guys take steps and start playing winning basketball, we're not going to win at the level we need to. So part of it's up to them. When will you guys be ready? When will you take these next steps? And when can you really impact the game instead of just showing flashes or, having a good 5-game run?
On that same note, why did you value continuity this summer? 13 guys back and Justin Minaya. Why was that the aim?
Yeah. I think it's something the word connectivity you hear from us a lot, and it's something we believe in and value. It's that, as a group, in order to be your best, you need to be connected and you need to be on the same page and you need to gel. And part of our goal, this offseason, and something we were happy about, was there wasn't too much turnover. We have 2 key additions, and of course you got to get used to those new guys, but we like that we have at least a year with this current group. I think we saw it last year when we made all those trades, that early in the season we were really disjointed. I like the fact that we won't be as disjointed this year. But at the same time, we're not at a place in our roster where we can be content or comfortable with what we have. I mean, we challenge ourselves to be active. We challenge ourselves to continually look for ways to improve. So we're trying to balance that a little bit. It's, yes, we value the connectivity and the cohesion and the veteran leadership, but we also need to figure out where are we headed long term. So just trying to balance that a little bit.
Chauncey enters the final guaranteed year of his deal. How will you evaluate him when losing is pretty much expected? What does he need to do to prove to you that he deserves an extension? And will he be allowed to coach the team however he wants to pursue as many wins as possible, even though maybe losing is in the cards?
Mm-hmm. Start with the second question first. Chauncey and I have a great relationship where, we talk a lot. We spend a lot of time together. He values my input, but I also value his expertise. And I don't meddle in, the day-to-day or the game-to-game or even month-to-month stuff with Chauncey. I'm always there for him if he needs me, but I trust him in his decisions. And, as far as style of play, rotations, how to open or close games, that's up to Chauncey. And if he needs any input, I'm there for him, but I'm going to let him do that. As far as how this year is going to go, it's a challenge for all of us, for Chauncey, for our players, for me. We all need to take steps. Last year for us, it was just so vague the way the season went and ended. There's just not much we can point to, as far as saying, hey, this is what we are, and there's not much we can take away from, because we know that all these circumstances led to us, not being very productive. So for this year, my challenge for Chauncey, my challenge for myself, and for our guys, take steps. If we're taking steps and we get that clarity I was talking about and become very conscious of what we are and where we're headed, I think that's going to be a successful year.
Joe, you guys didn't really do too much as far as changes after the stuff you did on draft night. How close did you get to any bigger changes later on in the summer with any kind of the other guys on the roster?
Like I said, we always try to be active, or definitely more active than most. So we're constantly talking to teams and kicking ideas around and, looking for ways to get better. I mean, you hear it from me, I think, a lot. We're not good enough yet. We need to get better. So, there were plenty of conversations, none that just became ultra substantive that got too close to getting done. So, we'll go into this season with that same mentality that we have the luxury where we can be patient and we can wait for the right deals, but at the same time, we don't have, a sense of contentment with us. We want to keep getting better, and we want to go find other guys like Denny and Donovan and all these other additions that we've made over time.
Joe, when you look at a season like this, how do you evaluate wins and losses? What are not even in the record book, but what's a successful season look like? What are the marks? What are the kind of measuring sticks that you look for in a season like this?
Heavily focused on development, not just individual development, player to player, but team development. Obviously, in this league, you got to have really good players in order to win at a high level. So, how are we developing our guys to get to those levels? But at the same time, how is our team developing? How are we developing, as a unit? Style of play, what are we establishing? What are we leaning on? What is our identity in that regard? So as we look at this team and, gauge how we're doing from month to month, we're going to be looking at that. Like, what steps are we taking to move forward?
Kind of on that vein, what are your conversations been like with Scoot and Shaden specifically? What are your expectations for them, and what does a successful season for both of them look like?
Yep. We have high expectations for both. We believe in both guys, both extremely talented, both still very young. So it's trying to, temper our expectations a little bit. Like, we know that even from both of them in Shaden's first 2 years and Scoot's first year, we saw some high-end moments. How can we create more of those? How do we create consistency out of those? So, it's challenging them to, to be better on a nightly basis, to plug holes in their games, to work on their deficiencies, to not just have an occasional highlight, but to provide substantive winning play, on both sides of the ball. So just a lot of conversations about how they can get better in the short term and where their game is headed towards in the long term. And a lot of feedback too, what do you need from us? Like, coaching wise, strength and conditioning wise, how can we maximize you, in all aspects of your game, and off the court as well, working on that kind of stuff.
You mentioned the luxury of patience. What is the timeline on patience? How long can you go from sort of this, we're trying to build something, into seeing substantive progress?
Yeah. We would love to win as quickly as possible. I think, who wouldn't in this league, right? But we're committed to doing it the right way. We don't want to skip major steps in order to lower our ceiling. So I think that's our discipline is, how committed to this rebuild can we be from a year-to-year basis, knowing that if we skip steps, we're likely not going to be quite as high level as we need to be, and trying to, again, balance that out. So it's something that, isn't necessarily always easy to go through, but the more patient we can be, the more intentional we can be. I think we continue to raise our ceiling by doing so. That said, this is hard for us sometimes. Like, winning 20 games like we did last year was not easy. Nobody enjoyed that. Nobody looks forward to that. Like, we want to start taking steps. But we're also going to be smart about it.
You've got some veterans that are maybe not quite on the timeline of Shaden and Scoot. What is the likelihood that you might have moves with some of those players, say, at midseason?
Time will tell. I want to just hit the ground running with these guys this year, so we'll see how things go throughout the season, and trade deadline's quite a ways away. We're always going to be open-minded, like, we're going to look at it deal by deal and evaluate these one at a time and decide if that's a good move for us or not. We have a plan. We know what we'd like our end result to be. Sometimes we don't control that, but it's just staying open-minded and nimble, and just seeking out what's best for this team, not just in the short term, but the long term.
Joe, is everybody good health-wise going into camp? Is everybody a full go? And specifically, how's Rob doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody is essentially good to go. The update on Rob is he's doing really well. He started playing 5-on-5 with us last 3 or so weeks. Not fully cleared yet as far as, like, without any restrictions or limitations, but definitely has been really active on the court, and his participation level in practices will continue to ramp up. We'll start tomorrow, and maybe we'll hold him out of a few things here and there, but he's making really good progress. Otherwise, the roster is looking good health-wise. A few guys that are beat up a little bit, but nothing bad. And as far as I know, everybody's a go for tomorrow for practice.
There you go, Joe Cronin, Trailblazers 2024 Media Day. Some interesting stuff there from Joe. Joe's always pretty transparent about a lot of these things, and he could shine you on more than he does. He could kind of pitch a narrative, but he generally chooses to just kind of shoot people straight, and I think the people really appreciate that. It's nice to see an executive kind of be honest about where their team is at. A lot of times that doesn't happen, so I really appreciate that from Joe, and I think a good way to start the season for Joe and a good way to start the season for the Trailblazers, kind of setting the expectation for what the season's going to be, both for the players and for the fans. And now let's hear from Chauncey Billups at 2024 Media Day. His thoughts on wanting to win while knowing the team is currently in a situation where wins are going to be hard to get sometimes. The notion that you have to, quote unquote, find what a win is, which, again, as I mentioned previously before Joe's availability, I think is an incredibly important thing for this Trailblazers team. And I think some of the fans understand too. I think particularly when you look at the draft in this upcoming season, I think there's probably a lot of people that are like, hey, there's some guys in that draft we really feel good about. So if we don't win a ton of games this season, there's at least going to be a certain segment of the fan base who is not going to mind that too much. But again, it's important to figure out, how are we gauging success? How are we gauging our progress? And you need to do that outside of wins sometimes. And so Chauncey talking about that, I think, is an incredibly important thing. Again, both for the players and for the fans, because I know that's something they're talking to the players too as well. The situation with Ant, Scoot, and Shaden in terms of the guard rotation, the changes that Chauncey made to his staff this offseason, Denny Avdija fit, competition on the roster, which again is something we talked about earlier, and the competition at center. Let's go ahead from Chauncey Billups, his thoughts at 2024 Trailblazers Media Day.
I think you've obviously been through something similar last season, but how do you balance your desire to win with a roster that is maybe not geared to do that?
Yeah, I'm always going to have, I think y'all know me by now, I'm a very competitive person. I'm always going to have a strong desire to win, no matter if our roster is good enough or not. That's just who I am as a person, And that's also who I try to teach our guys to be, So I'm never going to compromise that. I'm always going to be fighting and scrapping, for the win. I think the one thing that I have learned is even when our roster isn't good enough to win, you got to find what a win is, Sometimes that's just the development or finally getting a guy to see, the game or see this play or see this action or just get better at it. And seeing our guys connect and seeing our guys guard and seeing our guys talk, those become wins, in these situations. So, yeah, I'm always going to be the same. I think we all know that. But I'm no different than anybody, Jody, Joe, everybody wants to win, and everybody has a burning desire to win, So I'm no different than any of us.
Coach, do you feel like you've been placed in a pretty difficult position with one guaranteed year left on your deal and not much hope to really win this season?
I just think in our game, regardless, and I say our game, I'm saying the NBA, I don't think it matters what year you're in anymore, You can be in the first year of your deal, you can be in the last year of your deal. It's all the same, You got to go do a good job. And if not, we see it all the time. Coaches get fired, don't even get to finish their first year, So I don't think about that. I don't worry about that. What I'm really most proud of is I just feel I'm light years ahead of where I was when I took this microphone 3 years ago. Just in my development, it's been a lot, It's been a lot that I've dealt with since I've been here. And every single one of those things just makes me better, So I just feel so much different and so much more prepared, as a head coach now, having gone through so much. So I'm not concerned with me being in the last year of my deal or what could happen or this. I don't concern myself with those things at all. I just want to go do a good job, and I know that I'm going to do a good job. I'm really happy with where I'm at. I'm happy where my staff is at. I'm happy that our team is healthy, and I know what we're up against, being so young and so inexperienced. The hardest schedule in the league. I mean, I know what we up against, so I'm not unrealistic. Joe's not unrealistic. Jody's not unrealistic. They're not asking me to go out here and find lightning in the bottle, in the position that we're in. I just got to keep getting better.
Last year, one of the primary goals, and the same thing this year, is to develop that backcourt, but the big three missed 100 games combined. What do you hope to see from that trio, Anthony, Scoot, and Shaedon this year?
Yeah, I'm just consistency, really. I want all three guys to just be consistent in terms of just playing. You got to have them on the court. I thought we missed a lot of opportunity last year for Shaedon, obviously being hurt. I wanted to see if he was going to emerge and take that jump. Obviously, he wasn't able to be on the floor, so I'm hoping to get that. I'm hoping to see Ant out there more. I'm hoping for Scoot to be out there more, because let's be honest, those guys are a big, huge part, maybe the biggest part of our future here with the organization. So we're going to need those guys to be out there on the floor to continue to take some steps to get better. We can't emphasize that enough. It's just kind of getting them guys out there and making them understand, our game.
Chauncey, what went into some of the staffing changes that took place on your staff this summer, and kind of where do you think the staff is at now in terms of what some of their strengths are?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the staff. I really am. First you start with Nate Bjorgren, who was obviously a longtime guy in Toronto under Nick Nurse, and I hired him last year as a consultant. Just because he's just so dang good, man. Just to be able to pick his brain, he come in and out of town and just help me with things. I can call him at 3 a.m, asking him questions. And then, fortunately, I was able to hire him this year, so I'm really looking forward to having him on the staff. He pretty much can do everything, he's a wizard in my eyes. And then I hired Chris Fleming, who was basically the #1 assistant in Chicago. In charge of their offense, but more importantly, he's in charge of the development of Kobe White. And we see these young guards that we keep talking about that we have, and Scoot and Shaedon and Anthony, to me, is still a young guard in the league. And to have a guy like Chris to kind of see some of those guys through in their development is going to be important for us. And not only that, I mean, there were a lot of things that we were pretty bad at last year, honestly, and offense was one of them. So to have his mind offensively, to be able to help me, help our team, is going to be a big deal. And then another addition that we made is Ronnie Burrell, who was behind the bench, but another really good young coach in the league. He was coach of the year in the G League a couple years ago with the Brooklyn Nets. So we're just really excited, about my staff. I feel really happy about the changes that we made and the people that we brought in. I feel very confident in our staff.
You mentioned those three guards. It's going to be difficult to have all three stay around long term. Just what is it going to take for a duo to rise out of those three? And how do you manage that when knowing that it's going to be difficult for those three to stick around and somebody's probably going to have to go?
I don't think about that difficulty. I really don't. What I think about is just trying to make them all reach their potential. They're all so different, and they all can be all-stars. They all got all-star potential. So I don't think about 2-3 years from now. I don't think about any of those things. I think about how can I make them all better. I think about how can I, help Scoot from having a tough year, last year. How can I help him? Ant, he's older than those guys, but still, to me, in my eyes, Ant, there's still so many levels that he can get to. He's still young, and Shaedon as well. How can I help these guys? So I just want to coach them. I want to coach them hard. I want to challenge them, and I will. And I think they know that. We all know that. I'm always going to challenge our guys. And then, like you said, just see who emerges, Just see who emerges. They all going to have the opportunity. They're all going to have the same opportunity. And then you just see what happens. And those are not things that I can control. So whoever's over there screaming, I hope they're ready to go tomorrow.
I don't know how much you've seen him like in workouts or whatever over the last month, but how do you see Denny fitting in?
Obviously we only played against Denny twice a year because Eastern Conference, but he's been here, all month, and I've been so impressed with him. He's easy to fit in anywhere. He can fit in anywhere. He's a basketball player. Our fans are going to love him. I mean, he plays with so much fire and desire. But just skill-wise, he can really pass the ball. High IQ. He can guard multiple positions. Really good rebounder. Another thing that we've been needing, since Josh Hart left, we've been needing a guy that can go get you 8, 9, 10, 12 rebounds in a game from that position. So he's going to fit in perfect. He's still young, still a young player. Really cares about playing the game the right way. If a guy's open, pass it. If you can get on the floor for a loose ball, get there. And if you don't, he'll say something about it. I love it. So I'm really excited to coach Denny.
Chauncey, this team isn't really all that different from last year, with the exception of the additions of Donovan and Denny. What do you look at this team and look for as far as identity?
I think just having some consistency with people being on the floor is the obvious thing. I just said in the press conference with you guys too many times before games saying I don't know. I don't know who's playing. I don't know what's going. So I'm really looking forward to not having to do that as much with you guys. But in terms of just identity and things, nothing really changes with me and what I believe in. I've been saying it for years. And I just want our guys to be connected. I want our guys to know each other. I want them to play for each other. We don't have that go get a bucket ISO guy every single time. So we can't afford to play that way. We got to play fast. We got to move the basketball. We got to help each other on defense. We got to do all the small things to even be competitive. And by the way, I love that. Even if we did have those type of guys, I want us to play that way. So nothing changes in terms of that. The one thing that I would say that I'm really, really excited about is that we just got so much competition throughout our roster in terms of competing for minutes and starting spots and rotation. Like we finally have that. So I'm really, really excited to start that process up tomorrow.
Hi, Chauncey. You talk about competition, so I want to ask about the big man in the group. So you got DeAndre, and then you guys pick Donovan this year, and you get Robert Williams back from the bench. So you got 3 big men in the group. Will you ever consider put Donovan in a power forward position? Because he's talking about he can shoot threes and stuff in the training clip.
Well, you missed a guy too, in the Wap Reith, who obviously had a really good year for us last year. Had a great summer. He's been having a great spring. But, we do have the luxury of having some really good big men. And with DA and obviously Donovan and Rob and Wap, and there's going to be some times where I'll be trying things, and playing 2 bigs out there at times. I'm not sure if Donovan is the one that's going to play the 4. Probably not. But having 2 guys out there, there's some teams in the league that play 2 bigs. That's the beautiful thing about where we're at. We can try some things and see if it works and see if we can try to grow that way as we're trying to figure out what we're doing. So we have some guys that, they're going to deserve to be out there. They're going to deserve to play. So we'll that's why I get paid what I get paid. I got to figure that out.
You tried last year to increase the pace, and it didn't always work. Is that a goal again this season, to really ramp things up, become at least entertaining, even if you're not winning a lot of games? Yeah,
that is the goal, Aaron. It is the goal, to try to increase our pace. I thought we were in a pretty good pace to try to do it last year, and then, Ant gets hurt in the first game. He missed for a while. I mean, we make the trade for Malcolm and DA, 2 days before training camp, but we had been working the time before that on that pace, and then obviously, we got to just pick it up quick. And Malcolm's not going to, play with a lot of pace. That's just not who he is. He's going to be very efficient, but he's not fast. So, you know, it was a little difficult to kind of keep it going in terms of that. And then just being hurt, you know, you're playing with so many guys that just don't even know what we're trying to do. So we've been focusing on that this year already, just with our just pick up games and letting them just hoop. The biggest thing I've been telling them, just play fast, have fun, man, you know. So I think you guys will see a little different, you know, offensive, see us different a little offensively, and then defensively too. You know, we're gonna pick up and pressure and kind of do what we've been doing.
Interesting stuff there from Chauncey as well. And that is going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, we are back. Season is here. A couple shows a week, both here and on the Blazers Balcony with Brooke Olzendam. So check out the Trailblazers Podcast Network if you haven't already. Also, Section 113 with Michael Holton and Travis Demers. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is also on YouTube now, as some of you may or may not know. So go ahead and check that out on YouTube/Trailblazers. Obviously, if you want to see some of the practice video, you can see it on our socials, but you can also see it here. But you can't see if you're just listening to the podcast. You have to actually watch it on YouTube. But shout out to all the old school podcast listeners anyways. You're my originals, folks. I appreciate you out there. So thank you for joining me. As always, we'll be back later on this week with more editions from practice, from training camp, 2024 Trailblazers training camp at Tualatin. I am Casey Holdahl. We'll talk to you later this week. Go Blazers.
Hey, this is Chris Murray. Thank you for joining us on The Briefcase.